Seeing this, did you get it recorded? We're recording now? Good morning again, yeah. So thank you all for being here. Those of you all who will be viewing this later online and everything, thank you for taking the time out to spend some time with us. We are going to be talking, as Paula mentioned, the title for today's talk is The Secret of the Holy Instant. I've been delivering this talk in one form or another over the past 2 or 3 weeks. So this is about my 4th time to roll through it. Each one of them has been different because I'm different. You know, each time that you're showing up and you find a different way into it. And at first, the first service that I did around this, I actually named what the secret was along with the Holy Instant. It was this and the Holy Instant. And then later on I was like, no, I think I want to keep that a secret. So there is a secret to it, but it's one of those secrets that's sort of so present right in our face that we don't recognize it necessarily as the key, because we're maybe thinking that it must be something less obvious or something like that, like some other thing I don't get. But I promise you, when this secret is revealed, you'll know it. It's part of who we are as people who practice unity principles and so forth. It's just woven into that. It's woven into ideas that hang with, like, the 4 agreements. You know, those things. You know, one of the things that I liked about unity in the very beginning, as I began, you know, doing studies and so forth, and like learning the principles and kind of getting them involved, was that I was, you know, my favorite of the 5 principles was the 5th principle, which is the action principle. And basically the way I take that on is that, you know, the other 4 principles are really more statements of spiritual truth. There's one power, there's one presence active in the universe, in our lives. You know, God's good. We're created in the image and likeness of that. Therefore, we have a divine component. We're co-creators, right? And that we're co-creating this experience by the activity of what's going on in our thinking and our feeling nature, right? That what's happening in here is how we see the world, right? So we're in charge of that activity. And that we're taking time out in the silence. And then in the silence is where we're going to experience what we're calling the Holy Instant this morning. That's not my term, that's A Course in Miracles term. But that's another sympathy between A Course in Miracles concepts and ideas and unity. What we call the silence, A Course in Miracles would frame as the Holy Instant. And it names it as the Holy Instant, and it differentiates this particular instant from all other instants in the, you know, time continuum, you know, past and present and future and so forth. And it calls it an interval in time. So you got this string of your lifeline going on, and then every once in a while you have this interval in time that seems to just slightly stand outside of the normal flow. And it's in that gap, in that interval, where we're entering into the Holy Instant. And of course, in Miracles language, it's always it's the same thing for us entering into the silence. We're taking time out to not do, right? We're taking time out of the silence to be still and know that we're in the presence of God. And so that silence that we're already accustomed to in practicing unity principles, it's the same thing as the Holy Instant in effect. In different languaging and different ways to talk about the 2 things, but they're essentially the same thing. And then the 5th principle, of course, which is my favorite, which is the action principle. And basically the way I take that on is that these first 4 principles, they don't really mean anything. They don't have any power, any influence, any effect or consequence in my life if I'm not willing to practice them. If I'm not willing to take action. Like, what would it look like to take action on there's one power and one presence? You know, only one power and one presence. Well, I was raised Catholic and Baptist largely, and there were more than 2 presences. There was the devil, you know, vying with God. And so there's 2 power centers, and unity helped me fuse that into, no, there's just one. There's just one power, one presence. What we would call this other power is not really another dominion of power competing. It's just us, you know, misapplying spiritual principles and so forth, and we make errors, and sometimes those errors are, you know, malicious and intentional, and other times they're unconscious. You know, but we're all falling short of the glory, as they say. You know, we all fall short of the glory. y'all have probably heard me say this in the past, that, that if you have an unlimited potential, and I believe that we do, that we are born with an unlimited potential, that if we have unlimited potential, we're always going to fall short of the glory. Because you can never actually achieve an unlimited potential. Because no matter what you achieve, no matter what you express, there's always more potential in front of us than what we can actually embody. So my friend Cindy Wright is giving a talk over there this morning at Unity Church of the Hills, and she's talking about the spirituality of imperfection. And I don't even have to hear her talk, I just look at the title and go, yeah, that's right. How can we still find and believe in ourselves as powerful beings if it feels like we're never going to actually achieve our potential? Well, the truth is we don't have to achieve our potential. We just have to be tacking in that direction. You know what I mean? It's like we're moving towards that, because me of my own, like we were talking about the joy a while ago, and like that experience of the joy and how it shows up for me, that ineffable, I don't have words for it. It's just a combination of, ecstatic happiness and joy and all that good stuff, and then I also have this tinge of melancholy and sadness. It's almost like when I experience joy like that, the first time that I palpably can remember that in writing a song was a song called One Thing Remains, and it was the first song that I wrote in this phase of my songwriting life, which has been, I guess we're approaching about 25, 26 years on this particular expression of it. When I wrote this song, it was unlike anything I'd ever written before. Unlike anything I'd ever written before. I was palpably aware that I wasn't alone, even though I was the only songwriter in the house at the time, that I wasn't alone. I was actually, there was something else, communicating with me. And when the song was finished, as I was getting close to the finish line with it, I had that moment of joy that I just got overwhelmed. And part of the feeling that I was feeling in that moment, the sad part, was how healing it felt. Because before I wrote that song, like an hour before I wrote that song, 2 hours before I wrote that song, I wasn't feeling very good about myself. There was a lifetime of, worthiness issues, and life wasn't working. I was in backside of 30 and having to reinvent myself. Everything I'd worked for had crashed. I didn't feel good about myself. And that song came through in that moment of cooperation and co-creation. I literally felt blessed in that. I was grateful, thankful. Thank you for sending me this song. I thought you had forgotten about me, was that kind of feeling, and to know that I was connected to something larger than myself, that I wasn't alone. It overwhelmed me. I call it joy, but man, there was also a lot of rewiring and healing and sadness and melancholy and regret over why didn't I get this sooner in my life, kind of thing. So it's a whole mixture of things, but it gets to that place of, because it is such a mixture, that's why it's so challenging to try and describe what joy is. It kind of shows up for us in different ways. We shared, kind of the ways that we encounter it, but it is that complex, that dynamic, that it just, like, once you choose your path to try and describe it, you're already limiting the expression of what it actually is. You're just finding a way to make sense to you. So it's in the silence that we are able to access that. But I have to take action and put myself in a position to be in the silence. I have to make a decision. This is really funny. I have to make a decision to be still and know. I have to make a decision to not do, but to be. So it's a weird little mix that we're actually making an intellectual decision to put ourselves in a position to not do anything, just to be available, to be transparent, right? To make ourselves available. And that requires, it's an act of will on our part. Is July the Power of the Month, Will, or is it August? It's either July or August coming up, that the Power of the Month is will. So,
It's August.
I think you're right. It's August, and that's sort of the executive power. That's where we're deciding, we're making decisions. If we're employing Unity's fifth principle, for example, to practice the silence, we're deciding to take action. And the action that we're deciding to take is to put ourselves in a position to be available to the silence, to stop our doing, to simply be. That's also that act of will, that willingness, also puts us in the position to experience what the Course in Miracles calls the holy instant. And the holy instant is a place of miracles, basically. I mean, it really is. It's like when we become transparent and we're not making requests or petitions or having, like, I'm praying for something specific, so I need a specific solution, I need a specific response, or that's at least the sort of elementary school expectation of prayer. Hey, get me this red bicycle by Christmas. It's a specific, it's a specific request, and we're looking for it to be fulfilled in a specific way. But when we really get the power of the prayers, when we're in there and that we're truly praying for just the highest good, the highest possible outcome for all concerned, knowing that as we pray into that and intend the highest outcome for other folks, that also includes us. We're not separate from that prayer. Right? If I intend the highest outcome, the highest good for all of you all in one of my prayers, I'm not keeping myself exclusive to that same good. In fact, I'm having to pray from the awareness that good is already present. Isn't that how we practice? We're not saying, hey, can you call up the truck stop over there in Arizona and have them, 18-wheel us some love over here to Austin, Texas. No, it's everywhere present, right? And so I'm not praying from a sense of lack. I'm praying that the love that we need is already present. And so the more effective prayer is to pray into that awareness that it's there, and that those of us that are assembled can wake up to that presence. That's a more useful thing. I don't have to pray that we need the presence over here, right? We need the power over here, because it's already here. We're the ones shifting our perspective, right? Like that Paula kind of hinted at in some of the prelude stuff there around the idea of joy is like you almost can't create it, because if you're trying to create it, once again, you're trying to create it from an intellectual construct, a logical thinking. If I put myself into this position, I'll experience joy. Do this, this, and this. Have the right designer, yoga mat, and face east, and like whatever the checklist of things is. All of those things may be perfectly useful for certain people to practice a routine like that, to put themselves into that space. There's nothing wrong with that. But the truth is, you can get the same effect with a guitar in your hand. You can get the same effect standing on the edge of a lake watching the sunset. Like any time that you are willing to just surrender into the presence, surrender into the holy instant, that it's always available. One of the ideas in A Course in Miracles around the holy instant is that the holy instant is always now. It's always now. So in any moment during the course of my day, I can put myself in the position through a decision, a willingness to put myself in the position to be present. This can happen in all kinds of ways. If Spirit knows that you're available to do the will of Spirit, it's amazing how the opportunities get created for you to wind up in conversations with people that you wouldn't ordinarily intersect with. And it might be just a 5-minute thing. It might be the only time you ever see them in life, but something gets exchanged in that encounter. And A Course in Miracles would call that a holy encounter. That every encounter is a holy encounter in potential. Have you ever driven up to a red light and there's someone there with a sign? They're out there for change or something like that, trying to get money for food or whatever was going on the day. And there's some occasions where you sit there and you might not have any cash readily available, and you maybe try and avert your eyes so they don't make the appeal directly to you, or you might say, I don't have any money right now, but I send a prayer to that person. Or there's other times when I can see the person up ahead and I'm coming up on the intersection and I get a hit in consciousness that says, this one's yours, you got a $20 bill in your pocket, and this one's yours. Like I know for certain as I'm approaching, the decision was already made. That, okay, yeah, this $20 is is, going out the window. So I'm like digging it out of my pocket before I even get to the person, right? And roll down my window, and when we encounter, I hand them the 20. And numerous times in doing that kind of thing where you're not just giving $5 or a couple bucks, like you're giving what's in your pocket, right? Numerous times I've had that incident where when they recognize what you've handed them, that there's an instant where they look at you in acknowledgement, and you can just totally see the gratitude on their face about what a difference that made. Because they've been sitting out there all day long, people maybe throwing change, you're giving them a bottle of water or $1, or whatever the case may be, you give them a $20 or a $50 bill, it changes, it's a holy instant for them. The other times that I've had that hit and ignored it and was a block past it and goes, dang it, that was mine, like I know that it was mine and that I didn't do it, okay? So the point is that when Spirit will use a willing vessel, right? So if you're making yourself available you're practicing the holy instant. That's what A Course in Miracles calls it. Practicing the holy instant is a matter of me keeping my willingness in play to be available. Because every encounter is a holy encounter. It could be somebody that I'm sitting next to at the restaurant bar counter while we're both waiting on our food, and an incidental conversation gets, created or initiated by one thing or another, and before you know it, you're in a 10-15 minute conversation with somebody, and you wind up going deep. Like, it's amazing. Like you don't necessarily stay on a superficial level, like how's the weather and who's going to win the ball game tonight kind of thing. It's like for some reason you wind up going deep. That's the holy encounter. That's when you're available. You're making yourself available to the holy instant, to be participatory in that, to be co-creative with that process. And it like for me to put myself in that position, it's cultivating an ongoing sense of readiness and willingness to be available to that. Am I always available to every potential holy instant? No, I'm not. No, I'm not. The day the sun won't set and I'll miss some. I promise you, like the sun won't set, because the holy instant is always, now there's always the potential for a holy encounter in every single moment. And you can't legitimately be available to them all. Even if you're a full-time, willing servant of the Lord, so to speak, and you're constantly in service to other people and being available, there's just going to come a time as a minister or whatever in that kind of position when you're just not going to have the bandwidth to be available for everything. So don't worry about any holy instant that you realize, oh wow, I could have leaned into that a little bit more. If the awareness is enough, like, yeah, okay, there was one I missed. I said I was ready and willing and able to participate in the holy instant, and there was one I missed. Don't beat yourself up. Just go, I missed it. What's next? Send me another one, Spirit, because it will. It will. There'll be another one shortly. Like, Spirit doesn't have a watch. Okay, y'all realize that there's no time clock. So as soon as you pray into, like, make me a willing vessel. I'm a eligible and willing servant to go where you tell me to go, to do what you tell me to do. You're at that stage of willingness on your part, Spirit will answer. Yeah, Spirit will answer. There's plenty to do. Reverend Michael Beckwith, he has a nice quote that I always refer to, and it's like, every newspaper headline is a prayer request. Like, just look at the newspaper headlines and you just pray into it. Like, you'll never have a lack to pray into stuff, because everything that's going on out here is ultimately a prayer request. Course in Miracles says there's only two kinds of actions: acts of love and requests for love. Acts of love, requests for love. So let's say somebody shows up in your space today, workspace or wherever you're doing, and somebody kicked their cat before they left the house or whatever, and they're just in a bad mood, and they just come in blaring. You didn't really do anything, but all of a sudden you're there, and you're the one feeling the force of their action. Did that feel like an act of love? No, it really didn't feel like an act of love. I don't feel very loved right now. That didn't feel like an action of love on their part. Oh, then it must be a request for love. what's the appropriate response to a request for love is an act of love, not another request for love. Like, I don't want to hear about your bad day, I got my own bad day going on. If you throw your own request for love in there, then there's not going to be, that's going to be a misuse of the holy instant. That we can improve not only our day by responding in love, but we also improve the other person's day who's making a request for love. That's how and where we take action. That's the fifth principle. Those are the instants, those are the moments, and we all have them, like multiple times a day probably, whether with family, friends, co-workers, like whatever the case, even the world at large. Like if you watch the news or follow the news, you should be praying all day long because there's everything coming out of the news is a prayer request, right? And so instead of reacting to the events out there, we can respond in love. Like if we're gonna make ourselves available to consume that news, that information and everything, then are we just gonna consume it passively and feel bad and polarized like everybody else in the country, or are we gonna lean into it and be proactive and work with it and try and pray into that? That's an appropriate use of the holy instant, is when we, like no matter what's going on, that we are willing to continue to be an agent of love, to continue to let love express through us. That's when we're walking the walk. I mean, that's where the goodies are. I mean, when you get down to it, if we're gonna learn these principles, then it's incumbent upon us to take action. And the more we take action, the more we make ourselves available. It's not I that's doing the work. Remember that one? It's not I that's doing the work, it's the Christ within. I just have to make myself available. It's not Rick that's doing anything, it's Rick's body making itself available for the Spirit of love to communicate through, to be present with that. Because it's out here, it's swirling around. It's everywhere present. We're not lacking love. If we're lacking anything, we're just lacking willing participants to be channels of love. And it doesn't mean that if somebody's totally mired in a habit of fear and that's just how they're going off and they're being critical and judgmental and they feel poorly about themselves and all that kind of stuff, all of that can be corrected. All of that can be corrected because at their foundation, they're still a divine child of God. At their foundation, they're still good. But there really is no bad. There's no evil. There's just good people misusing spiritual principle. And once I make that sort of foundational decision, it helps to keep me out of piling up unnecessary grievances or judgments or having issues with this, that, or the other. Because if I'm being proactive and saying, oh wow, look, I'm getting a little upset here. I'm not liking this news article. I'm not liking what they're saying. I'm not liking the outcomes they're projecting and everything. It's like that's not good, right? So I have my human part where I'm reacting to that as well, and I can feel afraid. I can feel afraid. If I don't feel afraid for myself, I can feel afraid for my daughter and her friends and the next generation. And like, it's a really strange phenomenon that as we get older, we look back and those kids coming up, they don't know what they're doing. They don't have any idea about what's going on. And that's a natural, generational kind of curve. And we are the stewards. We're the elders at this point in time. That's just a fact of life. We're the elders. And so we've got more experience. And we should know better by now, right? And that even if we're still present, while we might not be physically able to do some of the things we could do when we were younger and had energy and less commitments or whatever the case may be, and could go, whatever, what we can do, what we always have available to us is our capacity for expressing love, is our capacity for prayer. Like even if we're physically challenged, we still have that. And we can still participate in the larger consciousness, even though we might feel isolated. So the secret to the holy instant is putting ourselves in that position to be available to the miracles. I'm not doing the miracles. You're not doing the miracles. But we can be agents of miracles. We can be channels of miracles. Of Course in Miracles says, in fact, I'm going to read this. I'm going to read this section. Has anybody ever actually attempted to read A Course in Miracles before? Yeah. Okay. Most people that I know, they have attempted to read. They didn't actually make it through. But for everybody who attempted to read, they probably read this paragraph because it's at the very beginning. Okay. So it says, this is a Course in Miracles. It is a required course. Only the time you take it is voluntary. Free will does not mean that you can establish the curriculum. It means only that you can elect what you want to take at a given time. Now, one of the things that Course in Miracles talks about is that it's only one form of the universal curriculum, what it calls the universal curriculum. There's a universal truth here, and it's been expressed in multiple ways, hundreds, thousands of ways over the course of time. And that A Course in Miracles is only one form of that universal truth. It's not saying it's the only one, it's not saying it's the one, it's one of a bunch of others. They're all attempting to communicate this universal truth. And so in that universal curriculum, it says this: the Course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love. You know that? It does not aim to teach the meaning of love, for that is beyond what can be taught. Well, what's it all about, Alfie? What does love mean? There's how many love songs there are out there trying to communicate what love meant in that interpersonal way, or even the universal way. The song "The Greatest Love of All," y'all know that song, right? "The Greatest Love of All." Whitney Houston made a huge hit. I think George Benson is the one that wrote it, I think. The greatest love of all is what? Learning to love yourself.
Yeah.
The greatest love of all is learning to love yourself. Because when you truly learn to love yourself, you have an appreciation for how hard it is. How hard it is to truly love yourself in the highest sense of the word. And if you take that work on, empathy and compassion for other people is a natural byproduct, because you begin to be humbled. Like, I have a really high degree of willingness to do this, to achieve this, and I keep falling short. Oh my God, I'm never going to get this. Right? Everybody feels that sense of not doing it perfectly. And if I can't do it perfectly, then I'm not worth anything. Like it's a whole, like all of those rabbit holes we can go down, they're almost kind of, it's kind of like we get this scorecard. If you choose this is what you're, this is what you're going to win here, right? So we have to make ourselves available for that, because once we can accept, one, that we don't have to do this by ourselves. That's a savior right there, that I'm not in this alone, okay? Because if it was left to my own devices, Rick's own devices, Rick's personality self, to solve this stuff, oh man, we'd have a frustrating time if it was just left up to Rick, to do it Rick's way. And then that's part of our growth. Paul and I were talking, before the thing, like just looking back on how I was in traffic, or with a customer service representative on the other end of the phone in the earlier years of my walk. Like literally, I have gauged part of my spiritual progress on how well I behave in traffic now, and how well I behave with customer service representatives on the phone. Truly, because when I began studying A Course in Miracles, for example, those two experiences, how frustrated I would get in traffic about not being on time or not being in control, is what it really gets down to. That's what's in common with both of those scenarios, traffic or the customer service representative, is that I didn't have control over my experience. And I didn't realize that then. I realized that kind of later. But being able to see how gracious I am in traffic nowadays, guys, it's like it's night and day. Because I don't run around being reactive. I've done my own work. I feel safe in my space. So even if somebody cuts me off in traffic, it's more like, hey, prayers for you. Like, I hope you get safely where you're going, like whatever hurry you're in, because it's not just me that's in peril from your impatience or whatever the case may be. It's all the other people on the road too. So what was a personal thing when he cut me off instantly now becomes a universal thing, that everybody's safety in the traffic. Even if he sped ahead of me and he was a half a mile ahead of me, if he has a wreck up there with them, I'm still impacted, because I'm going to come up on the wreck right behind it. Then I'm going to be stuck in traffic, and then I'm going to be really frustrated. You know what I mean? So it's like, but instead of being angry like I would have been, back in my 30s, it's more like taking the opportunity and converting it to a prayer for safety for all, instead of a judgment of the person who cut me off. That's just one example of how these things, we think those encounters in traffic like that are somehow separate from our spiritual life. They're not. They're not, because I'm either going to react to the situation and play some old tape and be angry and frustrated or whatever the case may be, or I'm going to respond. I'm going to respond. The word responsibility, response, ability to respond. Responsibility, when we say someone's responsible, is that they're responding to the needs or the requirements to manage a house, manage a family, like whatever that looks like. Responsibility. So we're either going to react, in which case we're not even thinking anymore, we're just accessing an old tape that when this stimulus comes in, this is how I behave, and we just react. That's that knee-jerk reaction, right? Or, oh, wow, that person that cut me off in traffic, was that an act of love or a request for love? Think about that for a second. Didn't feel very loving because it almost cut me off, hit my front fender. Didn't feel like an act of love to me, okay? What's your move, Rick? Well, you know, I could just judge that guy and cuss him all the way down Mopac, you know, or I can say, hey, I'm safe. Like the reality is he cut me off, we almost had an accident, but we didn't, so I'm safe, that's the reality. And then I can go back into that moment, like be present with that moment, not playing my past tapes and not projecting my future fears, but just literally be present in the moment. What's the highest action I can take in this moment? Pray for safety for this guy, for sure, and everybody else that's around him. Now I've converted that from a reaction into judgment and all the negative stuff that would come along with that to a positive. And I'm back to square, and I'm vigilant. I'm watching this guy moving out of traffic, and I'm maintaining my intention for safety. It's a completely different experience. Same kind of event, but completely different experience. But that, I didn't learn that on my own. I learned that from practicing things like the Holy Instant and A Course in Miracles and Unity, right? And so when we get into that, the basic idea is this. It's your willingness that gets you there. That's all. A Course in Miracles says you don't have to understand how any of this works. You just have to be willing to practice what it teaches. And if you are willing to practice what it teaches, your own direct experience will prove the truth. So willingness, the silence, the Holy Instant, they're not separate things. The always do your best in the four agreements is not different than the fifth principle in unity. Once again, these are all different forms of the universal curriculum. Different presentations, but getting down to the same idea. So the secret of the Holy Instant is what?
Willingness.
Willingness. There's number one answer. The only correct answer. Yeah, willingness. It is. It's that, just that little willingness that we put that willingness on the table to be an agent of love, to do our best to respond in love instead of react in fear, like making those small decisions and setting that intention, and then putting our willingness on the table. We don't have to know how to do it. We don't have to understand how it gets done. We have to make ourselves available to the Holy Instant, and that's the same as making ourselves available for the Christ within, the Spirit, whatever you want to call it. So with that in mind, let's take a few minutes here to take this deeper. We're going to go into a meditation. I'm going to play a little bit of a Daniel Nahmod song here to kind of set the stage for us. So I just encourage everybody right now to, put your writing instruments down that you've been taking notes on. Get yourself repositioned. Yourselves comfortable for this beautiful Daniel Nahmod song. And then we'll spend some time in the silence. When I pray, I feel my heart go deeper, my heart go deeper into my God. When I pray, I feel my heart go deeper, my heart go deeper into my God. Right here, right now, right where I am, I pray. Right here, right now, right where I am, I pray. When I pray, I feel my soul go deeper, my soul go deeper into my God. When I pray, I feel my soul go deeper, my soul go deeper into my God. Right here, right now, right where I am, I pray. Right here, right now, right where I am, I pray. Sweet, sweet, loving Spirit, thank you for the silence. Thank you for the holy instant. Thank you for the power, for the presence. It's everywhere active in our lives. Help me today to be available to the holy instant, to be available to the communications from Spirit, from the Christ within. Help me to use each and every holy instant to become a more efficient channel for the expression of love. To allow myself to be an agent of change and an emissary in the work of Spirit, in the work of love in this world. Keep me from negative reactions and keep me willing to respond in the positivity of love in all circumstances. The holy instant is always now. Each and every encounter is a holy encounter. Help me to stay willing to be an active co-creator in those experiences, in my life, in the lives of those close to me. And as a human being on this planet, there is always something that I can do from wherever I'm planted to tilt the game in the favor of love. Each and every time I choose love, each and every time you choose love, we are making ourselves available to the holy instant, to the holy encounter, to the presence and the working of miracles. And for the miracles that we've experienced, we are ever so grateful. For the miracles that we have participated in creating for others, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the insight and the awareness that I too am a co-creator. And for the power, for the presence, and for the opportunities to experience this life, we say thank you, thank you, thank you. We pray in the name and the nature of the indwelling Christ, and so it is, and so we allow it to be. Amen.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
We appreciate your being with us today. And for those of us here, we appreciate you online. And if you have been served, just recognize that we are a part of being online as a result of all things that make it possible. If your funding is possible, we appreciate it. God bless you. Have a wonderful, blessed day.